Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling.
Welcome, everybody, to Morning Magazine for this February 16th, 2022. You have your host, James J. here. At 10:30 today, we're going to welcome in our friends from Macmillan Memorial Library. We have Andy Barnett joining us right now in studio, Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Shane Blaser. Good morning, Shane.
Good morning, James.
Good to have you with us, and we want to wish a good morning to our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media as well. Kev, good morning to you and the gang over there. Mayor, how have you been?
I've been well, and you?
Good. Thank you for asking. Good. Busy night last night, and a busy week, really, I imagine, and busy couple of weeks. I wanted to ask, how early in the game in the new year do things really start to get busy? I know when we talked in December, it was kind of a lull time. So, obviously it's February, but how quickly do things start to pick up the steam and the things that get done? There
is a lot of planning going on now with, our spring construction, our summer season, or our season of construction. And so they're doing a lot of planning and preparations for that. You might even see them out trimming trees. So they're getting ready for trucks going down the roads with the box up.
Yes.
So they're working on that already to get ready for, the summer construction and, the planning and ordering parts and pieces. And so our street department's busy with that. And, then our economic planning development department, it's starting to ramp up now where they're, taking inquiries on building permits and planning for projects and those type of things.
When it comes to that, is there stuff going on with that we can touch on, or just things to look forward to?
Things to look forward to.
Gotcha. Right on. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's just kind of in the planning and the preparation stage.
Yeah, there's not much to cover, but it is something to look forward to, and that is nice. Then let's get into how the city is offering opportunities for a public comment on the proposed transportation utility. This is getting some steam. When we first started talking about this, I didn't hear too much from the public, but the last time we were with us and we touched on it, I heard some feedback from a number of different listeners out there.
Yeah, that's hot off the press that you have there.
Yes. Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, it's literally hot off the press. And so last night at the Common Council meeting, the council decided to proceed with the transportation utility, funding it at $500,000 versus $2.5 million, which, I don't have the exact figure, but it's roughly about $20 a year for residential customers, and they would avoid receiving a special assessment from the city where, they can be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 I've seen. So right now on our website, and we're getting it out, that you can contact myself or Joe Eichstead, that we can provide what your assessment would be. And so there's a variety of ways through email, phone calls, or online that you can make those requests. And I think, we've covered probably the vast majority at about $20 a year, but it's our small businesses that I think they're going to be interested in knowing what that's going to cost.
Okay, yeah. It seemed like that would be a little more sensitive to them.
Absolutely. And the funding amount between $2.5 million and $500,000 is dramatically different. So, taking into account, at least from majority of the council's point of view, the concern was what that fee would be for that group.
And this is all to what end? As far as the transportation, what we're talking about here, for those that may not know the backstory of this.
So for many decades, we've funded partially some of our street construction. If it goes by your house, you're assessed a portion of that. It's a smaller portion, but it equals to a very large number. And so this will eliminate that. So we will not receive that fee. I saw one just not too long ago that was just shy of $15,000, and that is, I don't know how anybody, especially I get a lot of phone calls from seniors, people on fixed income, retired people that, that's a large expense. And then, if you can't pay it up front, it's put on your tax bill, which, over a course of 10, 15 years, it's still a very large number.
This was kind of your MO coming into the job, these kind of things.
Yeah, this was an important issue that I had spoke about, addressing the special assessments. And many of the council members feel, they all have some opinion regarding the special assessment. And we have a very unique council, which makes for great discussion. And so there's a lot of different opinions. And so it's been interesting to follow. But last night they decided at, $500,000 funding dollars. And then now going forward, we're going to have a public comment period to ask the questions. And then eventually an ordinance will have to be brought forward. So it's not, a funding level's been set, but it doesn't mean that this has passed, because an ordinance still needs to be passed and worked on, and people still have questions.
Yeah, and we'll certainly give you a way to reach the mayor at the end of the conversation today, as we always do, if you have questions or follow-ups things or anything. This is certainly a moving topic too. No pun intended. I didn't mean it that way. But there's a lot of moving parts to it and everything. So there's going to be a lot to unravel still. But this is certainly a positive for our area, for our residents.
I think so.
And again, kind of coming back to what I was kind of touching on there, and this is leading into where one of the main things I want to get into with you today, because for a little behind the curtain for the audience, we don't always have a blueprint or an outline of what we want to talk about.
No.
Sometimes we kind of just organically what comes up. But I did have to say that I noticed you were going to be in today, and we were coming out of yesterday was an election day, and it got me thinking about this, and because in the amount of people I've gotten to talk to in this job of representative or senators or congressmen or anything like that, you stand out. In main part because, as we've touched on before, you're just not a politician. You're not a career politician. You're not one of these people that was, you were born to do this necessarily. There's a lot of things you were born to do, man. And this is one of them, but it's not necessarily something that you were wanting to do.
It's not high on the list.
No. And this isn't something like you want to spend the rest of your life in politics or something like that.
Not even close.
It's a little bit different than, and I want to press this, there's always been fame seekers in politics. That's always been there. But it has really turned into a whole different game now, where some people get into politics on a national level, on a local level, all over the board. And it isn't just in this country. I'm not just talking about America, where they're not getting into it because they want to help their community or they want to help their state or their country. They want to get into it because they want to, one, get their name out there, and two, they can make money in politics. So what I want to ask,
not mayors,
no, and not local representatives either.
Yeah, you don't do that.
No.
We don't do this for money, and
right.
It's really about, for me, it's about my neighbors and the community that I live in. And
so I see a lot of the national conversation right now is, how do we fix this? How do we get this to stop happening or anything? And I kind of want to scream at the TV. It'll fix itself. Don't you feel, and I'm very curious about this from your perspective, because you're not a career politician, but you're in politics. You know what I mean? So
it's the nature of the beast.
Yes, exactly. And you're able to walk the line there, I think. I feel like I trust, and I know this is a little hard to say sometimes, but I do still trust our voting public. And I feel like a good voter, if you do your homework, if you do your research, you're going to be able to tell the difference of a person who just wants the job to get their name out there and maybe make a couple bucks, and the difference of a person who is genuinely doing it. Do you have that same confidence?
Yeah, I do. These are my neighbors, my relatives, my friends, acquaintances, business owners, retirees that are in our community that are choosing our leadership. And you have to trust them, would I like to see higher turnouts and greater participation in the old clerk? I mean, absolutely, because you don't want the minority deciding by a majority who our leadership is. But a lot of times that does happen. And we saw that yesterday in our primaries, is that, we're sending people to the general election by a minority of the voters. And we have, by majority, have to choose our representatives. And yeah, I absolutely trust them, and
Being a former clerk, I one other follow-up to this, because I know that low turnouts for voting has been an issue for the beginning of voting, especially rural areas. They tend to have an issue with it. Certain populations have a tougher time. And that has always been a little discouraging, I think, to anybody that cares about politics, that cares about their community and everything. One thing that I found encouraging, and this is a silver lining out of the last couple of years, is that we just pulled off a presidential election during a pandemic. We pulled off local elections during a pandemic. Just speaking for myself, I trust the results. I think every election in human history, there's some gray area that you got to do some homework and see what you can tinker with to make better. And you don't want people voting more than once. You don't want misrepresentation and all that as far as voting. But overall, I trust these poll workers. I trust these people that are doing their job, and many of them risking their health to do these jobs during a pandemic. I find encouragement in that not only we pulled off the election, but we had record numbers of voters.
Yeah, I can only speak for our municipality and my experience with the county, and they, from the poll workers to the county employees that participate in this, is, I completely trust it. There are so many checks and balances put into it that, I'm confident of the results that we get locally. I can't speak for anywhere else or any other systems or any other voting equipment, but what we do here in the community, even from the time that the clerks get their information to program their machines, creating test deck ballots to purposely create errors in the machine and making sure the machine corrects those errors or identifies those errors. Right. All those processes that go on to, I always compared election day like a wedding. You're doing all the planning and prep, and then hopefully the day of it goes off without a hitch. But it really is, there's a lot of work that's put in leading up to the election locally. And, I trust that, and I'm very confident because I've been intimately a part of that for so many years. And all the way up to the county level, our county clerks and their deputies, and they work really hard to make sure that, because it's the clerks and those poll workers' credibilities and that are on the line. And I don't want to be associated with something fraudulent or inaccurate. And so there's so much work put into it to make sure that doesn't happen.
It's almost deeper than the process. I trust the people. I trust my local community members. Locally, we're talking, of course. And when it comes to that too, you've got another silver lining I found too, where I don't know if this would happen without the way that the last 7-8 years have been in politics, or the pandemic, or some of these other factors. But the younger generation that is just turning 18, turning 19, able to vote for the first time in some of these elections and everything, the turnout of those numbers is higher than we've seen in our lifetime. Like any of our lifetimes in this room here.
There's definitely a renewed interest in.
Yeah. And that as far as the voting part goes, it's also a very informed voter nowadays. I understand that one of the biggest things out there is misinformation, and there's so much of that. But most of the people that I know that care about this stuff, they know where to look. They know the difference of going to a reputable news source and trusting Uncle Sam and his Facebook post or whatever.
Yeah, and there's so much more in the technology that they just know all the different outlets to look for information. They're very in tune to that, and something that my generation, probably some people aren't.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people don't have Facebook, or some of those other media platforms that they just don't follow.
I think it's especially when it comes to politics, it's one of those divisive things, and it can get so nasty so quick. But if you go into it with an open heart, open mind, and you start looking at it a little bit, almost with a third person perspective, I think you can see some hope in there. Not just for politics. I'm talking about our country. Forget about politics. It's all about the people and getting these good bills passed, taking care of our communities. That I see some encouragement in that, and I don't know if I've ever said that in my life, but I genuinely do.
And you talk with our local politicians too, up through the state level. The ones I've worked with and met with generally have an interest and a care in what they believe and in their communities and in the people. But we don't always agree with how they do it or how they go about it. But that's the process, and it's by majority, know, and that's just how it goes. And I remember when I've been on council, there was issues that I was passionate about, but the rest of the council didn't really find an interest in. And I've done the same. It's just kind of where you want to fight the fight. People approach me and like, well, why aren't you involved at the state level or in the school district? And my focus really, and that's why we elect leadership to be involved in that. And I think my responsibility as a citizens of Wisconsin Rapids, that's where I need to be hyper focused, because there's so many other issues that that come into play here that I cannot focus my time in other areas a lot of the time.
And I know from talking to a number of citizens over the last couple of years that you've been in office, that's part of the reason that you're in office is wanting that as opposed to the opposite, and having that stability as well.
I always say, and it goes for all politicians or people that get elected in office, that, our current term is really our interview, and if you agree with it or not, your chance to change that is at the next election. And then you go forward from there. And for me is, the community needs to go in a different direction. I respect that, and I've got 100 other things I could do, but if they agree with me, or at least the majority do, then we'll do it again. And it's just, I think that every time we go into election cycle with any elected person, you have to look over the last couple of years how it went, and if it was what you expected, or was it better.
And I that's kind of where I wanted to wrap things up with our local representation. And specifically, I'm just going to refer about to you and Representative Krug, who I know are locals. I know also are two people that didn't necessarily envision themselves getting into politics, but did because whether your community asked you to or you felt a calling to, it came from there. It came from that place. I think that's noteworthy, certainly for us. And we're not the only rural community or community in general that has that, but I think it's noteworthy for us around here. And it also speaks to the community, I think, as well, which to me brings encouragement. It's a silver lining. It's all these good things, and it's something that we can build on.
Yeah,
none of
us want our communities or our school districts to fail.
Right.
It's just that we don't always agree that we have the same approach to it or walk on the same path. And we just have to choose which path and who we want to walk with, and go from there.
And that speaks also to people getting involved in politics that may not always do that. But you have a calling, you have a feeling, you're like, no, this is too important. This is bigger than me. I've got to get involved. Even though I'm not comfortable doing this or anything, this is what. So getting to talk with you too for a number of years here, that gives me hope as well. And just wanted to give you guys a nice tip of the hat about that, because that doesn't happen without that. Yeah. We've all seen plenty, and I'm not just talking locally, I mean in general, especially where I come from in Chicago. There are a lot of people that get into the game just to get their name out there, and build on that, or treat it as a job in the sense of making a income. It's a job, but it's not a job that you do for the income, as Mayor Blaser will tell you.
It's not about that, And I think a lot of people that have sat in a seat before me through the history, you should have a general interest and care in the community and in the direction of the community and the people in the community. And for me, if that's an important part. And if you don't have that, then really, do you need to be doing it?
And I trust our voters that they can differentiate between the differences and everything. So we got a good 5 minutes or so left. Anything you want to touch on? Anything you want to get into?
So, we're talking about, this morning, we're talking about, there's a landfill expansion happening. Yeah. And it will be over the next few years. And so, that's kind of, there's a group of us through several different communities that are affected by that. So we're working on that in agreements and making sure that all of our communities are in the best possible position, having that responsibility of a landfill here. So that's a pretty important topic, and that'll be worked on over probably the next couple of years. That's
been building for a while, hasn't it, that topic?
Yeah, so I think we're just finishing. So there was an expansion. Now they're kind of completing that expansion.
Gotcha.
Now it's
okay.
Now we're kind of now it's planning for the next expansion, and that it's a topic that I think is important to the communities around us and to us, and we need to find something that's workable and safe and productive for all of us, and allowing a business to operate as a business.
How has the construction season gone in the winter here? I've seen a number of things being worked on, and it seems like things have been going pretty well.
Yeah, it's a lot of times in the winter, it's kind of reacting and putting patches and limping along until we can get to a nicer season to do something more long term. But they're reacting. We've been fortunate, and with the snow season. So I'm going to knock on wood, and that we haven't been But we have staff down there that's busy doing other things if they're not plowing, and so they're keeping busy doing that, and they do a good job. The supervisors out there coming up with projects to keep those guys going, and it's an opportunity to get projects that are shelved because there's too much snow and they can't get to them, and now they can work on other things now.
It feels like we say this every other winter, but it was so far, and nobody catch Mother Nature's attention here or anything, 'cause so far we've been skating by pretty good here. It's been a pretty, mellow winter. How has that been affecting our plows and our that budget there, without being too specific, of course?
Well, what happens, and it's kind of ironic, is that you have a snow plowing budget, but then you're utilizing the guys doing other things, so that money really end up eventually being transferred to other activities.
Gotcha.
And so it kind of all washes out in the long run. But technically for the snowplow budget, we've been fortunate.
Good. And it does sound like the whole kind of putting, we kind of gotten past putting Band-Aids on our roads, that we're kind of doing some real damage on those. They're doing some real work on those. And that's been really encouraging. I've heard from a number of people in the community that have been noticing that.
Yeah, and we're hoping to add more funding a little bit through the utility, a little bit through degradation fees, plus what we, to do more mill and overlay like we did on Dewey Street by the hospital last year. It'd be nice to get up to a couple miles a year to kind of improve the ride quality, and everybody appreciates a smoother, nicer road.
Yeah. Especially when you drive a Jeep. You feel every little bump and creak. I love my Jeep. I love it, but yeah, definitely. I actually want to remind the audience that I love taking questions from listeners, and I always encourage you guys to get them to me for the mayor. And if it is a question, I will ask him. And I did have somebody ask, because I think they missed our last conversation. I'm curious about the dog park, and if there's been any ground getting closer to being happening.
Yeah, so, and I take some calls about this, and so we're kind of working through the piece of land that we're looking at. There's a ditch that's going through it, so it's, we have to talk to the DNR if we want to put a culvert in it, because a lot of that 1 mile is in culverts through the city, and do we cover that up and utilize the whole space? And we're kind of working through some of those things, because there is a cost to it, and is that the best use of funding to culvert and cover that up? And
yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely, we talk about it pretty regularly at City Hall, and trying to get kind of a design or kind of a feel for what we can take to Park and Rec and see if they're in favor of an area. Plus, we also use a little bit of that area for construction, stand piles and things like that. So, working with the public works superintendent and talking to him, making sure we save space for him for their activities there too.
And as certainly as things change with that, and more news comes available, your office is so good at getting us information, and we get it right to the public. So we'll let you know as soon as we hear things.
Yes,
as that builds. But we're touching on a couple of interesting topics today, Mayor, and I know that people have follow-up questions, and you're always open to taking those. If people want to reach out to you, find out more information about some of this stuff, how can they get a hold of you?
They can email me at mayor@wirapids.org, or you can call my phone in my office is 715-421-8202. And if I'm there, I'll gladly answer. And if not, my assistant, Emily, will take the call.
Yeah, I appreciate Emily. Because
she's amazing.
She's so good at what she does. And you are. I thank you for not only having that great conversation about politics with me, but what you're doing for the community. We appreciate you, sir. We'll talk again next month.
Thanks. I appreciate it, James.
We'll talk soon. Kev, always good to see you, sir. We'll talk to our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media real soon. Looking forward to that. We are going to take a break, come back with our friends from Macmillan Memorial Library. We have Andy Barnett joining us on Morning Magazine, 97.5 FM, 1320 AM. We are locally grown radio.